Welcome to another episode of the Way of BJJ podcast. As always, due to strong language, inappropriate analogies, please do not listen to this around your kids. Now let's get to the podcast.
You just want to shoot from the hip?
Yeah, man, always.
Okay.
Always, man, yeah. We can just talk, man. Jeez.
Oh, okay, yeah, just have a conversation.
Yeah, man, dude. Like normal human beings, man. Jeez.
Fix my hair.
I know, yeah, all this. Well, I'm already recording, right? I'm not.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not editing this stuff out. This is gold. This is pure gold, man.
Okay, where you want to start?
Oh man, so yeah. Whew. So you think we're good to go?
We're good to go.
All right. Cool. Wow. Welcome back to another episode of the Way of BJJ podcast. Right. So today I'm here with a good friend and training partner as well. Okay. So I do have a question for you though, right off the bat. Have you given up on correcting people about your name being Sony? Because when I'm seeing your information up there, now it's Sunny. And then there's a bunch of people asking me like, yo, I train with Sunny. I'm like, did you know that his name is actually Sony? So have you given up?
I've given up.
You have?
For 40 years, I've been correcting people. My name is Sony, S-O-N-Y. They keep calling me Sunny. And after decades of correcting people, they win. It's Sunny now. So you can call me Sony, you can call me Sunny. I go by both now. You guys win.
Right. There you go.
If you really want to, just call me Sony, but I go by Sunny as well.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I was just talking to Luke, the chef.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, I'm like thinking about going there and training with Sunny. I'm like, you know his name is Sony, right? He's like, oh, the look on his face.
Yeah, then they get all offended. It's your fault, all of you. Don't be offended if you mispronounce my name.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So I think it's gonna be a pretty awesome conversation today because you have you have trained in so many different type of grappling arts, especially, right? So that's why I think you're going to be able to bring like so many different fresh perspectives into jiu-jitsu, because in jiu-jitsu we tend to be very tunnel vision in what the jiu-jitsu players do well, right? So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. But before we move on, can you just introduce yourself a little bit, like how you got started and what type of stuff have you been training, and just to.
It's a kind of a long story.
Sure, man. I got nothing but time, man.
Well, I was training martial arts since 1991. This is before the UFC.
Okay.
And at the time, I didn't know what I started in. I thought it was karate, but it was actually JKD concepts.
Okay.
So at that time, JKD, if people don't know, it's Jeet Kune Do, it's Bruce Lee's martial art. It was a very hot topic at that time. Like, taking things from other martial arts, combining them, particularly from boxing, taking the kicks from karate, even adding some Filipino martial arts like weapons. Like that was like a very popular thing before the UFC in the 1980s and the early 90s.
So that was MMA before MMA, pretty much.
I wouldn't say mixed martial arts in the sense of the sport, but it's mixed martial arts. Yeah, it's a mixed martial art in terms of like street fighting or self-defense, right?
Okay.
I know they attribute Jeet Kune Do as, kind of like the precursor to MMA, but I would say
whenever Dana White says that, I know he's coming from a pure marketing angle. It's not sincere. It's not.
Because JKD was not a sport. It's not meant to be a sport, right? But in terms of it was quite revolutionary because the idea of cross training, believe it or not, today it's quite normal, but back then you're supposed to stay in your own martial art. If you're doing judo, you only do judo. If you're doing karate, you're only doing karate. Kung fu, only kung fu. You can't mix styles. And what was revolutionary about JKD is that you can do all these things. You take what's useful and discard what's not. So that was the revolutionary nature of that. And of course, there's many different types of JKD. There's classical JKD, and there's other schools of it, but for the most part, as people understand,
Kung Fu.
Yeah. So there's Jeet Kune Do where it's what Bruce Lee originally taught. So it's what Bruce Lee originally taught was to strip down everything to its essential core. And his other student, Daniel Santos, said, well, no, you can add other things to it. And then there's another school of JKD practitioners who are no, it's got to be 100% street fighting, biting, all that stuff. So there's all the schools of thought. And if Bruce Lee was alive today, he'd be laughing. Like, this is like, it's like he wouldn't care, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I started in that. Eventually,
I see what you mean by this is gonna be a long story because we barely got started.
We barely got started. Yeah, it's funny that I don't really talk a lot. So
So when you get a chance to, everything just comes out. You're like,
people who know me know that I don't talk too much, but then now they're gonna see me talk a lot. It's kind of funny.
Nice.
Then I started getting interested in boxing because I got into boxing through JKD, started doing striking, boxing, more kickboxing stuff like Muay Thai, and then I got into Chinese kickboxing, Sanshou, all right? Even at that time, before the UFC, there was all this debate of like, what's the best martial arts? I never got into those debates. I always found like, okay, what does this thing have to offer compared to the other? So at that time, Muay Thai was just starting to become very popular in the early 90s. I guess there was K1 in Japan.
Okay.
And then that whole thing about kickboxing and Muay Thai was kind of exploding.
Right.
Everyone, this other generation thought Muay Thai was popular when Ong Bak came out. It's actually, the craze happened even way before then. So I was thinking, man, how am I going to deal with like Muay Thai kicks? Like those are like vicious, I don't want to get kicked in the legs. But what was also available to me was Sanda, right? Which is where they catch the kicks and you can like throw the person on the ground. You can't throw in Muay Thai. So I've always had this idea of like, instead of debating which martial arts are best, why don't you just take the attributes of each of them and see like how they work? And it's going to take a lot of trial and error. So then I started taking that approach. And even at that time, again, people would like really shit talk you because you're cross training.
Right.
They didn't understand like, I don't know. It was a big issue back then, and it's funny that it's still an issue now. And it blows my mind that cross training is looked down on.
Yeah.
Of course, depends where you're at, but
Right.
like,
Right. I mean, it's
more accepted now.
It's
but,
much better now.
yeah, but it still exists.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Which again blows my mind too. I'm like,
Yeah. Okay. So then, my goal in martial arts was I didn't want to be a fighter. I wanted to be in stunts. I want to go into the stunt industry. I want to be a fight choreographer. I really enjoyed, martial art movies, Hong Kong movies. I love that. I grew up on Hong Kong movies.
yeah, because we're about the same age, so we grew up on the shit, man.
Oh, the 90s was like a wild time for like Hong Kong films. I wanted to do all the John Woo gun fu, jumping through the glass and into like, shooting two guns. I love that stuff. I love that in slow motion, it's just like awesome. So I wanted to do that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I have to either go to Toronto or Vancouver. So I decided to go in Vancouver to make my break in stunt work.
Where were you at that time? Then?
I was in Regina, Saskatchewan.
Okay.
Yeah, I was born and raised there.
Nice.
So most of my martial arts training in terms of striking was there. And then I made my way eventually to Vancouver. Okay, so I could make my break in the stunts. So when I came to the city, well, I needed to find a job to support myself before I could make my break. So I decided to do security work. So it's very flexible. I can do shift work, then I can go train like Muay Thai, and I can train boxing, and then, I can work. But when I applied for the job, for the security job, my boss said, hey, you ever thought of doing loss prevention? I said, what's that? Well, basically, you're like James Bond. You just go into these department stores and you just walk around and you look for shoplifters. And if you see someone shoplifting, you just arrest them and charge them. And I didn't know that job existed.
He knows how to hype it up. You're basically like James Bond.
He literally called me James Bond.
It's nothing like James Bond.
It's nothing like James Bond. But like he literally said that.
But he got you excited about it.
Dude, he probably thought I was so impressionable. Like the guy from a small city. Oh yeah, I would love to do that. Boy. Oh my God. Okay, so okay, sure. All right, I'll do it. So I get to wear plain clothes. Awesome. I don't have to wear a dorky uniform and stand outside somewhere. I could just walk around.
Right.
So eventually I got pretty good at the job, I'd identify shoplifters and, take them in and write reports and stuff. I actually quite enjoyed it. It was pretty cool. And you get to know the people who were shoplifting, and you know, you kind of develop a rapport with them. You know, I didn't have any like ill will towards them. It's just like, hey, you got to do what you got to do. I got to do what I got to do. It's not a big deal. A turning point came where like I was making an arrest. I arrested this guy before, maybe 4 times before. This is the 5th time. And I guess he thought that I was going to let him go pretty easy, right? So he stole like, I want to say like close to $150 worth of like chocolate bars. He stuffed the whole thing in his jacket and he's walking out. And I'm just thought, okay, I'll just talk to him because I know him, right? So I approached him and I'm like, hey man, you got to like give back the stuff. Come on, we did this before. And then he started running. And I'm just like, oh, man. Okay, my instinct was to chase him, all right? If you ask me now, would I have done that? No, I probably wouldn't, but me being young at that time, I'm like, boom, I'm after him. Finally got him, I grabbed him, and then he started throwing punches at me. I'm like, okay, now this is on, like this is going to happen. But then my rational brain kicked in and says, hey, wait, if you strike this guy, if you do like a Muay Thai head kick on him, like that's excessive force. You cannot do that to this guy. You got to like subdue him in some way. Well, the only thing I knew how to do was strike. Maybe a Thai clinch, but even in the Thai clinch, I had to throw knees at this guy.
Yeah.
That's excessive force. So now my brain was just like I froze.
Yeah,
I didn't know what I do. What do I do now? And then what happened was, he did what I would describe at the time was a football tackle. He just dove for my legs, took me down. And I had no clue what to do. The only thing I did was I got him in the schoolyard bully headlock and I just held on. And he was in side control, like what we described as side control, but he was like, he was basically pinning me. And I had this like, and I didn't know what to do. I wanted to punch him, I wanted to gouge his eyes out, but my rational brain's like, can't do that. It's excessive force, you're going to jail, you're gonna go to court, even if he's beating you up. I'm just like, damn, fuck, what am I gonna do? I can swear on this podcast,
Oh,
right?
dude, man, whatever.
Okay, all right,
You
good.
haven't listened to the previous episodes, man.
Okay.
We swear like a sailor out here.
I have a reputation to upkeep, so
Too
anyway,
bad.
it's already lost.
It's already
out the
lost,
window.
man. You're in the
So-
wrong kind of company.
So what happened was like, I got lucky. 6 police cars pinned us, pulled us apart, slammed our faces onto the concrete, handcuffed us. And I'm just telling this guy, the cop, I was telling him like, look, I am security, I'm doing an arrest. He didn't believe me. We went down to the police station. My boss came in, pulled me out. Okay, everything was settled. Okay, the guy's charged, whatever. So then my boss told me go take like a few days off, you know.
Oh, I thought he was going to tell you to go take
No.
jiu-jitsu lessons.
No, he didn't say that. I wish he did. So I went home and I was a little bit depressed. Not a little bit. I was really depressed.
Yeah, that was kind of an existential crisis.
Yeah,
moment, eh?
I had an existential crisis. I was like, everything I learned and I thought I was pretty good at, I couldn't use. Like legally could not use, you know? I didn't know what to do. I felt like a waste in my life. I said striking was stupid. Why did I do it? Like, and I was aware of jiu-jitsu, but I always thought it was stupid. I always thought grappling was dumb. Like you just punch them and kick them, but like then you replay what happened. That guy was in every position to like do what he needed to do. He could have punched me in the face, could have gouged my eyes out. So I was just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And so I was on the couch with my roommate. We're watching TV, and then there's this show called The Ultimate Fighter. And I'm like, fuck, this is stupid. This is rules. This is sport. It's not real life,
Okay,
right?
so this is like 2005-ish, right?
Yeah,
Right,
yeah. I would say, 2005-ish, yeah.
Because that's when the first one came out.
Yeah, the first one came out. I think it was the one with BJ Penn when he was the coach.
As the coach? Oh, so,
Yeah.
oh, okay, so that's not the first one then, is it?
No, I think it's second season.
Yeah, something like that.
Something like
yeah.
that,
Okay.
right?
But still early 2000s.
Yeah, around mid to early
Right.
2000s. And then I was watching one of the athletes and they shot on BJ and BJ did a sprawl and I got up, I'm like, yo, look what happened. And I was glued on the TV. He's like, that guy did the football tackle. My roommate had no idea what I was talking about. He's like, no, the guy did that to me. And okay, what did that guy, what's that guy's name? BJ? Okay, so BJ did something called a sprawl. Okay, so now I was glued on The Ultimate Fighter ever since then. Like it was, at that time, it wasn't like drama. It didn't get the athletes like arguing. It was all about like education. This is how we train, this is what we do. There was some drama in it, but like they showed a lot of training footages and training montages. So at that time, The Ultimate Fighter was really good. It was very educational. So then they were talking about jiu-jitsu, and then they were talking about wrestling, and then they were talking about MMA and mixing everything up. And I'm just like, I had an epiphany. I'm just like, hey, look, the answer was just right there. I said, okay, I got to find a jiu-jitsu club to train in. I got to start learning jiu-jitsu. But in my mind, I still was holding on to the idea of striking. Like if I did both, that would be even better. Because I already have a base, but like, see, my rational mind says I can't use the striking, but like part of me was so identified with it because I didn't want to learn anything new, right? Aside from a few techniques from judo, not judo, jiu-jitsu, but like my whole thing was like, if I just learned enough, if I was competent enough, then I'll be okay. So I looked into the phone book because we didn't have, well, there was internet, but we didn't have social media at that time. It wasn't that advanced. So yeah, we had phone books back then in mid 2000s. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. For the younger viewers out there, yeah, there used to be, we have these huge ass books with everybody's phone numbers listed in
they got
there.
thinner and thinner throughout the
Right,
decades.
right. But if you want to find something, you have to look through it and say, okay, where can I find the phone number? So that's the phone book.
Yeah, I know. That sounds so old.
I know.
So I called up Marcus Soros.
Ah,
Yeah,
old
Marcus
school,
Soros was the first jiu-jitsu club I trained at. And at that time, he was like one of the top schools.
So what was the first training experience like over there?
I talked to Marcus on the phone. He said, just come over and check it out. It was a no-gi class.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
He was
Ahead of his
teaching
time.
no-gi. Yeah. And on that first class, we did arm lock, triangle, and one sweep from the bottom guard, bottom position. And then we had a Q&A, and he said, you can ask whatever you want. So I asked him about the double leg thing, and he said, yeah, you just sprawl, and you can go for guillotines. I had no idea. This was like something like, it was a whole paradigm shift. And I was hooked, and I tried other jiu-jitsu clubs. Other clubs said, we don't teach you submissions until you don't know all the positions. I'm like, I don't want to do that. Marcus will just tell me what to do, right? I wish I did that approach first because I was very naive. So I trained with Marcus for 10 years. I was basically apprenticed under him. Yeah, he took me aside, and I was very appreciative of him sharing a lot of what his approach to jiu-jitsu was. Got me the good fundamentals, how to apply pressure, how to stay on top.
Yeah, all the most important things, really.
Yeah. The only thing is, like, we didn't do a lot of drilling. We did, like, it was just like, the classical approach, right? You learn technique, you learn the positions, okay, and then you go and spar, figure it out. That has its merits, but in either case, I'm very thankful for Mr. Soros. Like, he, like I remember like all the technical details he showed, like arm locks and triangles, and I watched Danaher videos today, and I'm just like, wow, Marcus had like very similar mechanics, right?
Cool.
Like it was pretty neat, like to watch
really,
that.
that's
right?
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So
So I guess
yeah.
the real question is then, after doing grappling and everything, and finally.
Oh, just one more thing.
No,
So I gave I gave up on stunt work, and, and then because of the existential crisis, like, what am I doing with my life? Like, what I should be learning jiu-jitsu, which is the craziest thing, right? And then I started working on my jiu-jitsu journey ever since, right? Like since I watched that Ultimate Fighter, and then trained with Marcus, and then I really sucked at jiu-jitsu. It was really bad. I sucked probably more than anyone else. I think it was a good like 3 years in until I actually understood what was going on. Man, I felt pretty demoralized. Like the first year, like I probably didn't even hit a submission. Didn't know how. Right? I watched these kids in the kids classes. They're hitting triangles, they're taking backs, and I was just like, there's something there's probably something wrong with me. Like,
You're a striker.
I am a striker.
Striker, that's
Like, I
what's
know,
wrong
I
with you.
thought there's something psychologically wrong with me, because if the kids can do it, like, and I'm a growing adult, like, certainly, like, there's something wrong with me about this. But, you know, over time, I understood that that was not the case. It's just I was approaching the whole thing from, my goals were so limited, right? I just take a few things, be competent enough, but it's not that. Jiu-Jitsu demands so much from you, you know? So that's, you know, then it started making more sense when I devoted myself more towards Jiu-Jitsu. I basically set striking aside and devoted a lot of time to that. So yeah.
Cool, nice. Yeah, because my follow-up question that I was gonna ask was actually kind of similar to what you just said, because I was trying to say, so was that the answer that you were looking for, right? Because you had this whole paradigm shift, this whole existential crisis happening, right? And then you're like, oh, jiu-jitsu is the answer. So it seems like you're saying, because you've shifted completely from stunt work and striking now into jiu-jitsu or grappling as a whole, right? But at that time was jiu-jitsu, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
so looking back at it now, in retrospect, was that the answer that you were looking for?
No, it was not the answer. Even though I love jiu-jitsu and I know like how it's applied, and you know, and the results it gets people to win a fight, that was not enough, and I recognized it early actually. As I was training jiu-jitsu, I had aspirations of actually going into MMA, because I felt like I had all this striking repertoire and it's going to waste. So I thought, you know what, why don't you just focus on MMA? And that way you got some grappling, you got your striking. Maybe like at that time I was 28 years old. I wanted to have my first MMA fight at 30. So I thought, okay, give yourself 2 years. Just work during the day, every evening and every weekend, you were just like training MMA. So I would train with Marcus for Jiu-Jitsu. I'd go to Master Song for Muay Thai. I would do boxing on my own. And the only ingredient I needed was wrestling, because I wanted to take people down and I want to defend against takedowns.
The football tackle.
Yeah. So even before I addressed the jiu-jitsu problem, I wanted to go into like, what am I going to do with my striking? And I think MMA seems to be the best answer.
Right.
There was no wrestling available at that time. I mean, there were wrestling clubs, but that's only for elite level people who were raised in wrestling. For myself, they wouldn't let someone like me in. Okay, so I'm like, well, what's the next best thing? What can I do? Well, there's judo, right? There's judo. And I'm like, okay, you know, you can throw people. It's kind of like wrestling. So why not? So I was doing some research on judo, and I ran into a Ultimate Fighter guy, Carl Parisian.
Okay, yeah. He's a
Yeah,
judo
Carl
guy.
Parisian
Famous
was
for being a judo guy, right?
Yeah, he was a judo guy in the UFC. He's the sole reason why I'm doing judo today, like for decades. Like, I mean, Carl, when you see him fight in the cage and the way he's throwing people, man, it was just like magic. I said, I want to do that. And I can do judo, right? That's available to me. So I was actually quite enthralled by that. I remember seeing an interview with Carl. He says, everything I do in the cage is from judo. I never learned any submissions from jiu-jitsu. All the submissions come from judo. And I didn't believe him. I said, judo's this stupid martial art where you just throw people on the ground and they can just get back up and they can like punch you in the face. Like, does it have submissions? That's stupid. So I actually did some research. I went to my local judo club at that time. It was Burnaby Judo. The first thing they did was groundwork. And I'm just like, this is jiu-jitsu. Like, wait a minute. So then I'm like, okay, what's this connection between judo and jiu-jitsu? I didn't know, right? Like, I was just like all interested in fighting. I didn't know like the history of it, right? So then when I was training judo, yeah, they had the arm lock, they had the triangle, they got pins, turnovers, passing the guard. It's a little more sophisticated in jiu-jitsu, but they still had it in judo. And I'm just like, whoa, I hit a gold mine here. Like, I'm getting twice as amount of training in the ground, plus I'm learning takedowns. Like, this is a great deal. And judo's affordable. Like, I can pay a jiu-jitsu fee, and for, at the time, it was like close to like $40 a month. That's laughable, right? I can do that. So if I have the time, why not just do some judo with your training? So when I started training with Marcus, 2 years after I started with Marcus, I started doing judo, and I've been working both ever since, even to today, both judo and jiu-jitsu. Nice. And now I wanted to go into MMA, but the thing was, it's like, okay, it's no gi. How are you going to apply gi techniques in MMA? And Minju, that was a huge problem, dude. Like, I had no training partners in wrestling. I had nobody to, like, do no-gi wrestling with. Like, you ask a judo guy, he'll laugh at you. Like, what? You can't do judo without a gi, right? Like, that was the thinking, right? But here's Carl Parisian throwing people on their heads. Yeah. Like, okay, so there's something, there's a disconnect here, right? So what I did, and I'll go to Marcus Soares' Academy, I'll get a couple training partners and say, hey, you know what? Like, I know we're starting on our knees. Can I just try a technique on you? It's called Osotogare. I just want to try the grips and see if I can throw you. And that's basically how I started the no-gi judo thing, right? On my own, right? I'm sure no-gi judo exists somewhere. It's not a real thing, but in terms of my journey of applying judo techniques to no-gi, it started from there. I'll just pull people aside, rep out a few techniques with certain grips, and then try it out in sparring, right? And it was a lot of trial and error. I wish there was an easier way, but yeah, there wasn't.
All right. Well, I mean, the good thing is because you put in the time to do all the experimentation and trial and error. So once you find something that works, it works, right? And it sticks with you, right?
Yeah. 1 year into Marcus Soares, I remember I did my first jiu-jitsu tournament, and I said, yeah, I want to do this. Man, I got destroyed. Man, it was like, I mean, to be fair, Marcus said the matchups were not really fair. Like, there's people like up a weight class, couple weight class ahead of me. But, when I did my first turn, I was demoralized. I said, I'm going to quit this. I'm going to quit jiu-jitsu. I don't like this. Yeah, maybe I'll train a little bit, but like, maybe I should just go back to striking and just like, resign myself to just like, I'm just not good at martial arts. Then I told myself, 2 years, man, 2 years. Why don't you just do that MMA fight? Why don't you just stick with judo, stick with jiu-jitsu, just put all your effort, and if you fail, if you lose, then give it up. So for those 2 years, I just like, man, I trained like a madman. All I thought about was training, both stand-up, both on the ground, did some striking. Especially like wrestling and judo, like the stand-up phase. Like, I focused on that because that's where, for the MMA fight, I wanted to dictate the fight. 2 years went by, I turned 30, got my first MMA fight. I took the guy down, put him in Kesa Gatame, the scarf hold, and I put him in a judo submission, key lock with the legs. Nobody knew what that was. The guy tapped. That was 1 minute and 30 seconds into the fight.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good shit, man.
Yeah. I was impressed. I was stunned. The guy was good, though.
Yeah,
the guy was really good.
That worked better than I thought.
Yeah. Then I signed up for a jiu-jitsu tournament. I was both gi and no gi. I threw everybody. I was like a yellow belt in judo.
Okay.
Threw everybody, put them in the pin, stayed top position. Some of the most impressive throws. Like, I'm not trying to brag. Like, this is something like jiu-jitsu people just don't train. I was out grip fighting people. That's when that was like a little bit of a paradigm shift for me. That's when I thought, okay, there's something to judo here for my jiu-jitsu. And obviously there's things about jiu-jitsu that's very good for judo. And again, this goes back to my JKD background. Like, take what works, discard what doesn't. a lot of, you know this, Minju, like when someone like, even today, when people do like talk about martial arts, they always identify with their martial art. Oh yeah, we're the best. Like jiu-jitsu's the best, right? Or no, wrestling's the best. You know, they look at the stats. Or striking, oh no, you're gonna knock the guy out. You know, like I've always found that whatever martial art you do, I don't care what you think. If you think it's the best martial art, I don't care. There are limitations to your martial art. You must know what your limitations are. At this phase where jiu-jitsu's at, you got to understand that the stand-up phase is very underdeveloped. That's a weakness, and there's no way around it. I mean, we see it today. Like the evidence is there. Like either you sit down to the ground and get passed, or you have to engage with them on the feet, right?
Yeah.
The question is, which one are you going to choose, right? I always found that you can take the advantages of your martial art, and you can always keep in mind of the limitations. That's very, very important. And if you acknowledge the limitations of your martial art, how are you going to fix it? And I found the answer was study other arts. Take what's useful from the other martial arts to fill the gaps in your game.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so speaking from a jiu-jitsu practitioner's perspective,
Yeah.
so do you feel like there's something the schools can do to make that, to kind of incorporate these into the curriculum somehow and make it better? Or do you feel like it's better for jiu-jitsu to focus on what they do well, and then for people to go cross-training other, stand-up grappling arts such as wrestling or judo?
That's an interesting question, because from the gym owner's point of view, let's just say you're a jiu-jitsu guy, right? You invest in some mats, okay? We're doing jiu-jitsu here, but if you're gonna do wrestling, you're gonna have to have better quality mats. So that means you gotta spend money, right? The expectations of the student is like, hey, we're doing jiu-jitsu, I'm trying to submit you, I'm trying to get, we have to be on the ground, but I don't want to like take falls and fall on my head or do any type of scrambles. So the gym owner is, he's gonna have some trepidations of like, oh, okay, like, how is the students going to react to this? And also there's a student perspective. A lot of the students that are hobbyists, and wrestling and judo are demanding sports, right? High risk for injury if you don't know what you're doing, right? Some people in jiu-jitsu, like they've never done a front roll in their life. Can you imagine? It's one of the, it's like, I've seen it, like even a basic somersault, it's very foreign to them, even though you're like rolling on the ground, and it has to do with proprioception, the relation of your body and space, right? Yeah, I mean, you're related to the mat, you're related to like how to get swept, but when it comes to like rolling, like literally like inverting yourself in air, that's very foreign to people, right? And that's something that judo is very good at. You learn that from day one.
Right.
You'll not just learn it, you'll experience it in day one, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, okay, your question was the idea of cross training. Well, it depends on the student, right? Like if their goal to improve their stand-up is just to learn a few techniques and then integrate into jiu-jitsu, I got news for you, that's not gonna work. You can't just like take a few techniques. You need to know. A lot of grappling, how it works is that you can't take individual techniques and put it into your system. It just doesn't work. You have to, it's sort of like learning a language. You got to string words together. You got to string sentences together. Then you can start writing paragraphs. Once you start writing paragraphs, you're pretty decent, right? You can't just take one technique and it doesn't lend itself to the next letter or to the next word. So you do have to take the project of actually learning it, right? And that requires failure. And you're going to fail, and that's okay, right? We see this in black belts, jiu-jitsu black belts. Like they say, oh yeah, I love to wrestle, I love to do judo, but they don't do it. And it's not because it's physically hard or it's difficult. It's just that they don't want to fail, right? I'm sorry, black belts. Like you gotta get taken down. I'm sorry. Like I've taken that path where I felt like I don't care if I win or not. I'm gonna learn this, right?
Yeah.
And you gotta take some falls. And you gotta take some hits too. You know, it's part of the game, just like jiu-jitsu. Like you gotta tap out.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I know. I hear what you're saying because if because sometimes if you're like, because you have to accept that, hey, if I'm gonna learn like a wrestling or judo exchange, right, and then you're a black belt, for instance, right, you could be taken down and then the person passes your guard right away because of the takedown, right?
Yeah.
And then that's kind of a hard thing to accept for them, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the reason why they're like, oh man, you know what? Instead, I'm gonna pull guard so I can.
Yeah, you go back to what you're safe with.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're also absolutely right about the you can't just like take one technique and hope for it to work, right? Because when you are thinking about the entire game of jiu-jitsu, you have to think about, hey, how does this whole stand-up exchange work in relationship and in context to what jiu-jitsu is, right? How am I gonna bring it to the ground, after all that and still be able to make sense of the situation and get to the control points that I want, right? So,
I read literature, right? And a lot of writers talk about this, like, if they're writing let's just say if we're writing an essay, right? In order to write an essay, I need to read like maybe 3 volumes of books to write one essay, right? If I want to write a book, I have to read like an encyclopedia of books to write one book, right? If I want to write volumes, I have to read a library of books to get into volumes, right? So like it's like if I'm taking one technique from judo, I have not read, the volumes that I need to understand that technique. Because how do you set it up? What do I do before I do I'm not just gonna like fire point blank. He's gonna see my technique, right? This is why we try to chain movements, chain other techniques. That's how we produce fakes. That's how we produce reactions, and a lot of those reactions actually help our throws. So like it is a language, right? You can't. There's no escape from it. You do have to learn some of the syntax, some of the sentence, the grammar of a grappling art in order to apply it. This applies to striking too. You can't just learn how to like throw a cross, right? You got to set up a cross, right?
Right.
Otherwise, they're going to counter you easily, right?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing right now, and would you say, because a lot of people are like, hey, you know what, I want to train takedowns for jiu-jitsu in that context, right? So, but almost like you should actually go train takedown in the other context, like completely judo context or wrestling context. So this way you are immersed in that language, and then you're able to take what works for you and bring that back into jiu-jitsu.
And you know what you know what that is, Minju? That takes energy. That takes time. It's demanding. We haven't found a science to like try to take how to learn like grappling very quickly, right? I mean, there's people who claim to do that, but like, it is demanding, right? You are learning another language, right? If I were to say for today, people want to, let's just take jiu-jitsu in the gi.
Okay.
They want to like learn takedowns, okay? I would suggest that they should go to a judo club and learn how to grip. Learn the grip fighting. You don't even have to learn the throws. If someone grips you, learn how to break the grips and fight for inside position. If you understand that, and that's your first reaction, they're not going to take you down, right? That's the first key. Like that, I can't emphasize that enough. Like it's like, when you play guard, I mean, the first thing you're going to do is create frames, right? That's the first thing you should be doing. You shouldn't be like, pull guard, start submitting, or pull guard or sweep. You should just like, hey, look, I need to create some kind of distance management or create some frames, and then I can see what I can do. I see opportunities from there, right?
Yeah.
But like the same goes for like takedowns, right? Grip fighting is key. Even before you grab a grip, like who's gonna get the first grip?
Yeah. So when you go and train jiu-jitsu, do you find that your judo training makes you dominate the grip fighting aspect of it?
Yeah. Let me just define grip fighting first, because people have different ideas of what grip fighting is. It's not like the strength of your grips, okay? Grip fighting is a whole body process, okay? Grip fighting is like getting your first grip and controlling your opponent with a second grip, and you have a small window of opportunity to act. Okay, because you're gonna lose that opportunity, and that's fine. It happens, right? But you're gonna decide what you're gonna do in that window of opportunity once you got your grip. If you lost your opportunity, you're gonna change to another grip, and now you have a small window of opportunity of what you're gonna do with that grip. If you lose it, no problem. You switch to another grip, right? Or you might even come back to the original grip, right? Notice that I didn't say you should be throwing people,
Right.
right? And you do this in the context of motion, right? So you gotta be learning how to move your opponent. I like to dispel a lot of myths that people say, oh, I can't train takedowns, I'm too old. Or, oh, I don't want to take too many falls. Well, in reality, when we train judo, nobody's really throwing each other constantly. It's a lot of grip fighting, a lot of motion, and you take a lot of few throws. I mean, all of judo is just entry to the throw. The throw is actually easy. This is how you get there, right? So that's one myth that people say, I don't want to get injured doing judo. Another one just saying, oh, I'm too old, I can't roll. I mean, dude, you do jiu-jitsu, man. You're getting rolled all the time, right? You could complain about sore fingers and elbows and wrists, man. Like you can take judo, man. It's it's gonna be.
It's not gonna be any worse.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, when we think about like doing something, like we think of it, we compare it to the highest level. Like we're not, like, you know, you don't have to be at that level, right? Just to understand the basic principles, right? Yeah, yeah. And once you understand that principle, the throws come very easily. Like I said, the throws are easy. It's just like, how do you get there? How do you put your opponent off balanced so that you can perform the technique efficiently? And that's where the patience comes in, right? So, yeah. So, yeah, that's all I have to say about grip fighting. There's a lot more to it, but that's probably the main principle.
Right. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so if we keep going on the same line of conversation, right? So is there any other aspects of jiu-jitsu that you can think of aside from grip fighting that you think they can really, you know, take a page from judo?
Oh yeah. I think this has been addressed already, but Kata position.
The scarf hold. Yeah.
Scarf hold. Yeah. It's because people don't know how to play it well, right? Oh, my back's gonna get taken. Well, there's two forms of Kata, one with the underhook, one around the head, right? Both have their advantages and disadvantages, right? Around the head is a very powerful Kata position, so long that you pull the elbow up and keep that elbow up, right? While leaning your weight in. Very powerful position, but if the person's able to bring their elbow close to the floor, they can escape, right? The other one is the underhook version of Kata.
Right.
You got chest-to-chest connection, both their shoulders are pinned, but the disadvantage is you don't have a lot of submission attempts from that. You can have a really nice hold down from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the head version, right? Do you feel like it's easier in the gi because you can control the arm better with the sleeve?
Yeah, precisely. Yeah. The material really helps. And I have a lot of submissions from there. I like that. And you can also, like, if you feel that you're losing that elbow, you can always like switch to the regular side control, right? So you can chain those together. So it's not a bad position as most people think it is. And you know what? A lot of the throws that you do, you're gonna end up in that position anyway. So you should learn to play it. Right? Another position is Yoko Saku. It's a side triangle.
Right.
It acts as a strangle pin. It's both a pin and a strangle. So it's a very hard. You're familiar with it, right? Yoko Saku? Yeah, the leg over. Yeah. It's a hard position.
I know. I was trying to do it like.
Yeah. You, like when you occupy both their arms and then you have just a trap triangle. It's a very hard position to get out of. Most people try to like spend a lot of energy trying to bridge out of it, right? You want to do that. Like you want to like make them tired, right? It's really, and you can knock them back down. Like it is a nightmarish position. And then every attempt that they're doing, you're cinching up your triangle, you know, you got some strangles from there, you got other submission attempts from there. And of course you can transition to other pins, right? So Yoko Saku is another one that's very useful. And I use it quite often, especially from north-south Kimura. And instead of finishing Kimura, I'll just go right into Yoko Saku and just hold them down.
Cool. Yeah, that's definitely one of the moves that we're seeing more and more in jiu-jitsu nowadays.
Yeah. I think Gordon's making it very popular.
And then the head Kesa position, even in the no-gi, Josh Barnett is like compression choke everybody from that position.
Yeah, we just had a guy from Toronto here, and that's one of his favorite moves. And he was a guest
bigger
instructor.
guy? Is it a bigger guy, right?
No, he was actually a medium-sized guy.
Oh, wow.
And he was able to like show the mechanics of how that worked.
Cool. Then that's per
really
technique
cool.
then. That's awesome.
Yeah. So So some of the things that you can use in gi jiu-jitsu, like that you can, sorry, let me rephrase that. Some of the judo stuff that you can use in your gi jiu-jitsu is obviously, you know, the grip fighting and get really good at that. Yoko Saku and Keisagatame. Other aspects that translate over. Oh, yeah, sacrifice throws. Okay, so like sumigeishis, tomonages. If you start with those techniques in the stand-up, your sweeping game from the guard is gonna get really good. Why is that? A lot of these techniques where you sacrifice yourself and throw them over your shoulder or over your head, it requires you to get your center of mass underneath theirs, right? And you have to do that really quick. And I found that I was getting pretty good at those sacrifice techniques in judo. And then when I started playing butterfly guard or I was playing like some type of open guard, I found that my sweeps just elevated tenfold. Like they were like being launched over my head. And it's because of the principles of judo, just getting right underneath right away.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Especially when you have dominant grips.
Right, because judo, you're thinking more high amplitude as
Yeah.
well, right? It's just,
Yeah.
It's a mindset thing too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because in jiu-jitsu, a lot of time we're like, oh, least amount of effort, let's try to be efficient. You know, we're not always thinking about, high amplitude, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so another thing I just thought of, right? That's super cool are foot sweeps. Because right now we're seeing a lot of people, especially in the nogi scene right now, like high-level competitors are going for that are doing like a combination of like a slide by and some foot sweeps together.
Yeah.
Right. So foot sweep obviously is a judo thing that
It's a strength of judo as well.
right.
Yeah.
But I don't see judo going for like slide bys and taking them back at all, right?
No.
Because it's not one of the scoring positions, right? So what are your thoughts on that? You know.
You don't see like, well, let's address the slide by issue.
Right.
The posture is different. Like slide bys will happen like in a wrestling context where they're like kind of hunched over and they're pushing into you, right? Judo postures are typically straight, so it's really hard to slide by somebody when they're straight, right? But in a wrestling context, they would have to push into you, right? And if you can time it, you can do a slide by, and once they're in motion, the foot sweeps are always available there. Foot sweeps, like in general, both in wrestling and in judo, think of it as like a jab in boxing. You don't expect the jab to knock people out. You just want to use it to open them up. But every once in a while, they'll walk into your jab and they'll just like get knocked down onto their butt, right? So, and that's a bonus, right? It's like, oh, he just walked into my fist, right? Like that's what happens with foot sweeps. You would try them just to like create kazushis or off balancing actions, but every once in a while you'll just hit one not intending to throw and it'll be like one of the most beautiful ippon style like throws you've ever seen, and you have no conception of actually setting it up. So that's the principle of judo. Like, I mean, judo is not like it's translated. There's no English translation for judo. It just literally means sort of like the soft way or the yielding way. But like, it's like doing techniques without thinking about it, right? Just allowing it to happen. And if it happens, great. If it doesn't, no problem. There's other things you can do, right? But there's those moments where you just feel like it's like an accident. You didn't mean to do it. But in what really is happening is that's the highest principle of judo. It should look like something very natural.
Right. So those are the most beautiful moments.
Yeah. It's those. I think the Japanese have a term for it, satori. Like it's like.
They have term for like.
Yeah. It's
weird,
very deep. Yeah. It's like a satori moment where it's just like. You don't even think about it. It just the whole situation allowed itself to like unfold.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And you were just witnessing it.
That's
how it is.
Yeah,
right?
that's one thing I love about the Japanese culture, right? It's like there are so many people just spending the whole time just to pursue that one moment of perfection, right?
Yeah.
Then it's almost like when they hit it, they're like, oh, my life, it's perfect now.
But you can't consciously do that, right?
I know, but the more you want to chase it, the less likely it's to happen, right?
Yeah. And that's how we should be pursuing our jiu-jitsu, actually. Like, you shouldn't be having, like, it's nice to have a framework, but once that framework is ingrained, you should just keep it, like, as a general guide and just have room for things to just unfold. Because I hit submissions by accident, and it's, like, so technically good. I'm just, like, surprised. I'm like, oh, he tapped from that, right? And it's like, and I look, and I'm like, wow, I actually have really nice finishing mechanics. And it wasn't something that I planned, right?
Right.
You know how you roll and sometimes you get swept and all of a sudden you hit a trap triangle out of nowhere and it's like, whoa, he's in my legs and I got to arm in. Man, then you start finishing the triangle or you might even, or they might already start tapping. Those are magic moments,
Right.
right? And you never plan those, right?
Yeah, but those are the ones that you keep thinking back to.
Yeah,
Right?
and then it'll never happen.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
when you force a technique to
Yeah.
happen. You're those you're like, oh, I gotta tap, whatever, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
but
yeah.
It's those magical moments.
Yeah, I think it happened to me maybe like twice in my lifetime to hitting a submission where I had no plan and it was just so perfect and the moment was just, that moment was so precious, right? It's just like, yeah, it was great.
Yeah. Okay. Cool, man. Yeah. So I'm gonna turn the tables on you then. All right. So let's talk about judo and
Okay.
what judo can learn from jiu-jitsu, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
because this is one thing that every time I watch a judo match, right, the throws are impressive, but I'm like, he's getting his back taken, even though technically he threw the other guy.
Yeah.
Right. So and then I'm like, yeah, it makes sense that training for a certain rule set, right? They get awarded points by doing that. But shouldn't the judo players be thinking about actual martial art aspect of their art as well, right? If I do a high amplitude throw, but then end up exposing my back and get my back taken, then what's the use?
Yeah. That's one of my grievances with judo, is that rule set where there's limited ground time. And if there's no action, they won't utilize the whole time. They will just stand you back up. So that's why they turtle up and they just stall and there's no action. And also it's spectator friendly too. Like people don't want to like see a lot of groundwork because they feel it's boring. There's a lot of rule changes in judo because of the Olympics, and groundwork has been affected because they want to see more action, right? But judo having its roots in martial arts, yeah, it's one of those areas that I feel that should be developed. Now, things are changing in the judo world. We do have newaza experts from Japan and even some from other parts of Asia. They're actually winning judo competitions with beautiful newaza. That is changing right now. Some
Until they change the rules again.
yeah, but they are playing within the rules because remember the rules for the ground is like the groundwork will continue so long that there's action. So the guy on top or the person on top is engaging.
Yeah.
And if the person's turtling up and the person on top knows a little bit of jiu-jitsu, how to like break connections and try to, occupy center mass, you know, that person on the bottom is like, you know,
So I
at
guess
the
my
mercy.
biggest question to you then is when, let's say if you go into a judo club to train, right? Should you be training like the Olympic style judo, or do you think the person should be like, hey, I should train single leg, double leg, because you can't do that now, right? In sports judo. But should you still be thinking about like grabbing legs? Should you still be thinking about, hey, you know what? I'm just gonna train my newaza, even longer than the required amount of time, just
Yeah,
because
most
I'm
judo
thinking
clubs do
about
that.
it. Yeah.
Most judo clubs, it's funny. Like they train newaza and they do rounds on the ground, pinning, escaping, arm locks. But when it comes to competition, they stall. It's one of those weird anomalous things.
So do they have special like competition classes where they just train that, and then the regular classes, then there's less limitations, so
Yeah,
they can develop the full art?
comp training is very geared towards like that rule set. So if their strategy is like if one competitor has a very particular set of throws that they're really good at and they get on everyone and they're not good at their newaza, maybe their coach will tell them to like, hey, look, you got to learn to like turtle up and just stall and maybe learn a few things like how to get out of pins, but other than that, that's as far it would go. Now, I can't speak for every judo club, I can't speak for every coach, but that's generally what I see. But when you go into a group class, in a judo class, you'll see like, a lot of turnovers, a lot of submission techniques. You see a lot of reversals. Like they actually do play the game. So I'm quite pleased by that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. And myself as a jiu-jitsu person going into a judo newaza class, they allow us to do whatever we want,
Right,
so long that is within the rules of judo, right? So it's good. It's upper body submissions and pins, pretty good.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that answers my question, because I was thinking the same way. I'm like, hey, just because jiu-jitsu schools are focus on ground fighting, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you shouldn't train stand-up, right? So then I'm thinking the reverse should be true, right?
Yeah, judo has a lot to learn from jiu-jitsu. And I've had a lot of high-level black belts from judo tell me otherwise. They're saying like, oh, but you don't have time to set up all these particular details in jiu-jitsu. I think it doesn't matter. Like, if you are really good at setting up your arm lock in a jiu-jitsu context, just imagine how fast you are. If you just take away some of the steps, I think you would like do very well. Actually, I don't think that you will do very well. Like, I've seen jiu-jitsu guys snap on arm locks on judo people, and judo people don't like that, you know, because number one, it's not their, you know, like, they shouldn't cry about it because, like, you know, this is your art. Like, arm locks exist in judo. Like, if there's a better way of doing it, you should learn from the jiu-jitsu guy. Right? But again, every martial art, like, they don't want to acknowledge the limitations of their art. They always feel that they have, like, what they're doing is the best, right? Especially under their rule set. They think they're doing great. So my whole thing is how do I exploit a rule set, right? Knowing that, like, different arts, right? Like for jiu-jitsu, like gi jiu-jitsu, like, I can exploit the rule set where I can get most of my points from takedowns, right? I can force the guy to engage with me. Right.
Then you're fighting from a point of strength.
Yeah.
Right? From position of strength.
Especially if someone's better than me, right? There's matches I've had where the other person was supposed to win, but because I've had the advantage in grip fighting, I had a few points, you know, ahead because of the takedown, right? I had advantages, you know, like, it's just, you know, that guy should have won, but, like, I just knew the rule set to the point where, like, I knew where there's some weaknesses. Yeah.
That's how you're supposed to do it, right?
Strategy,
especially if you're
right?
competing. But the funny thing is, all this discussion about jiu-jitsu versus judo and whatever, there are gonna be people saying, but jiu-jitsu is judo. It's the same fucking thing.
There is talk of just calling Brazilian jiu-jitsu just judo or ground judo, right? There is, like, I think I was listening to a podcast by Robert Drysdale, and he's convinced that Brazilian jiu-jitsu is basically judo. But I don't know. I think the Brazilians have a lot of contributions to jiu-jitsu, and I don't mind calling it Brazilian jiu-jitsu. And I think
we're hearing people just referring everything as jiu-jitsu nowadays more and more, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's changed a lot. I mean, this is one of the things, like, and it's pretty controversial, but I don't think we should have a belt system in jiu-jitsu. I really don't. I know there's research that it helps people get motivated and they achieve something, but I think motivation and achievement should come organically, not from, like, an outward display of, you know, I know this might piss people off, but I think it should be treated like any other sport, like kickboxing or wrestling or Sambo, where there's no belt system. Just get good, you know, work on your weaknesses, learn from each other, you know. I don't like this hierarchy thing. Oh, you can only spar somebody because a black belt told me to, or you can't ask someone higher than you. This is ridiculous. You know, I know a lot of people have, like, colored gis and stuff, and then you have, like, colored belts to mix it. I don't think any grown adult should wear colored belts. Like, I don't know. I think it's tacky. It looks, I don't know. Like, if I had a white gi on, I would have no problem just wearing a belt that matches the white gi, a white belt, right? If I had a blue gi on, I would wear a blue belt. You know, it's not a big deal. You go to Asia, if you train judo in Asia, they don't have colored belts. It's just white and black. There's no brown. Maybe some clubs might have a brown belt, but in Asia, you can have a 5-year white belt, and you would think, oh, this guy's just a white belt.
Wrong.
You're wrong. This guy could be training 5 to 8 years. And
So how does that work then? So basically, once you become a coach, you get a black belt? Is that?
Yeah, I think they have a different
process?
system. They have a different system in Asia, maybe around the world, but, like, I know particularly because I trained in Asia. What they do is, like, like if you're like a young kid, like maybe 10 years old, they'll try to get you your black belt as soon as possible. Okay, now why do they do that? Like I know in jiu-jitsu it takes you 10 years, maybe nowadays maybe 6 to 8 years to get your black belt if you're really good.
Oh,
Right.
man, I don't know about that.
I don't know. Like I know, I heard, but like last time I heard, it's 10 years. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
Okay?
Average. Let's say
Average.
yeah.
Average. In Asia, they try to do it like within 4 years. Okay, because they're training like every day, maybe 6 days a week. You got a young kid, and he wants to be a competitor. We got to get this kid a black belt by the time he's 15. And then he's going to start becoming the prime of his life. Now he can start like developing his competition skills. Okay, a black belt in judo is not really a high rank. It's basically it's just like your starter belt. The colored belt system is all a facade. It's just like to get. You should go for your black belt, and even when you achieve your black belt, that's when you officially start judo.
Right. So it's like now you're actually kind of competent.
Yeah. Now you're competent, right? And now you're going to start your competition career. Once you get around maybe maybe second to third degree black belt in judo, then you'd be like, okay, he's like, this guy's legit. Yeah. You should count on the degrees. There's 10 degrees in the black belt system in judo. So if you see a guy who has a black belt in judo, you shouldn't really like treat it like, like.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you with jiu-jitsu, having no belt system. That's actually why I enjoy no gi more.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can go into a room, then nobody knows anybody's rank, then it's just you just roll.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think one thing I noticed, even with myself, is like if you know the other person's rank, right? Either you're gonna give them too much respect, or you're not gonna give them enough respect just because oh, that's a blue belt, but maybe he's a freaking best blue belt in the world. He's gonna fuck you up.
Yeah.
So.
Well, let's just say I trained jiu-jitsu for 20 years, and the game has changed. And you got this young kid here who's not only just athletic, maybe he's not athletic, but he's got a new meta game. Taps me out several times. I'm gonna have an existential crisis now because I'm a black belt. I shouldn't be doing this. No, you shouldn't. It's okay to feel that way. The game has changed.
Right.
You should learn from this, right? I always say like, if you want your fundamentals, you should always learn from the old school guys. They have the experience. They'll give you all the fundamentals, all the micro details. It's good, but you should also learn from the young generation too, because they're the ones that are going to pick up the latest, newest technology in your sport.
Yeah.
So I don't mind learning from white or blue belts, purple belts. Those are the people who are just like on the new stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm just like I think I study more purple belts than I do with black belts because they pick up. They're the next generation. They're picking up the new stuff and they're tweaking it.
And they're hungry.
They're hungry.
Hungry for
so
knowledge.
Those are the people you should be learning from. Right? I'm not to discredit black belts, but see, again, then it's like, okay, then why do we need belts, right? Like, so it's like, yeah, okay, you got a whole IBJJF thing, and it has a nice structure, yay, but like, I don't know. I think it just looks dumb, like it's just stupid, I like, I'm not saying judo is better. Now, here's another thing, Minju, about the belt system.
Sure.
In my experience, I'm not saying it happens everywhere, but anyone who gets promoted to black belt has some type of relationship with the instructor. Maybe it's a business relationship, maybe it's like nepotism, maybe they're really close friends, they're best friends, maybe it's their cousin.
Yeah, maybe.
But if I'm like a paying, if it's something, there's something going on, right?
Yeah.
If I was just like a paying customer and I'm just on my merit of like training and supporting the club and just working on my skills, there's a point where it stops. And it's like, okay, there's a road that you have to take to get your black belt. Do you want to like, it's not said overtly, but there's some subtleties here. It's like, are you going to represent us? Are you going to do this? And that's always been my problem. Like, I don't want to align myself with I don't want to be part of a family. I already have a family and I have problems with my family. I don't need more problems from another family, There's going to be issues. It's just, and then when I do get promoted to black belt and then I leave my instructor, okay, so I have issues with the person who promoted me to black belt. but I'm gonna keep the black belt. That's like, oh my God, like, okay, it's so complicated, right?
Right, right.
Like if I got promoted to black belt by someone I did not respect, right? I would give him back his black belt respectfully. I would, yeah, I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to represent you, and no offense, but here's your black belt back. I don't want it. I'd rather keep my integrity, you know, work on my thing, you know?
Right.
But in jiu-jitsu, because the black belt is so valued, and too much value on the black belt, because it has meaning for, everyone has different meanings around black belt, but I think we should just get rid of it. It would make things a lot more simpler. How would you know your rank? How do you know, what's your stature in front of your students? Well, you know, what do wrestlers do? Well, there's so many medals that you win.
Yeah. And
Right.
you wrestle off every week.
You wrestle in, you get tournaments, you win some, you lose some. You know, you gauge, you keep. I think that approach allows you to approach training in a much more organic way.
Yeah. It's a nice ideal, but you know.
It is an ideal.
You know, it's not gonna happen because there's too much money to be made.
Yeah, I'm a romantic. You know, I'm idealistic, but in some cases I do kind of like because I say these things, I really don't care about belts.
Yeah.
I don't. I mean, you know me, man. You trained for a while, and you know, it's all about the training.
Yeah.
You know,
For sure.
If people get promoted, good for them, right? Like I'm happy for them, right? But for my values, I don't care. You know.
Nice, man. Yeah. So I think we're gonna start wrapping up.
Oh no, I
the
want to talk
podcast.
more. This is fun.
I know it
I have
is.
to go home.
It is. I know. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But yeah. So before we end the podcast, right? So if people, do you have anything you want to plug? You know, your club or anything?
Yeah.
at all that you want people to know?
If you want to train with me, Praxis. We do judo, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, no-gi. Come see our approach. We're in Main and Broadway in Vancouver. Oh yeah, I got something for you. The Praxis rash guard.
Oh, nice. The
very young.
original plan was for me to take my shirt off and then put this on right in front of the camera. But since the podcast is coming to the end anyways, maybe I'll do that next time. I will model it for you, I swear to God. But thank you so much for this. Yeah.
All right, great. Thank you for having me.
Awesome.
I love to come back. I love to come back. Show you more stuff.
We'll do another episode pretty soon for sure.
Great.
All right. So I guess the biggest takeaway here is you have to leave us a 5-star review. So that's why this way we get motivated to keep on creating these awesome contents for you, and just like that. And we're out.
All right. Thanks, man. Awesome.
All right. Come on, Brandon. Yeah.
Awesome.